And when I'm not translating the lyrics of Boogie Oogie Oogie for bored Europeans, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, empowering communities and changing lives. The Urban League has been there to serve when our community is at its lowest. It's never mattered what the crisis was. The systemic oppression remains constant for those most vulnerable. Here at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, we'll be temporarily adjusting our hours of operation and available services. If you are in need of resources, we recommend that you give us a call at 206-461-3792. To make an appointment, press 0 and speak with the receptionist. Walk-in hours will be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. And hey, we'll gladly work with you via phone as best as we can if you're exhibiting any signs of illness to assist you with information to save your home, find you a place to sleep, or connect you to job opportunities. The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. That's 206-461-3792.
Sergio LaCour's Love Lines. It's on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Thursday nights at midnight Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific. Music and dedications for the grown and sexy.
This is your Rainier Avenue Radio.world community update on free online exercise classes. The YMCA of Pierce and Kitsap counties has launched more than 60 free online exercise classes and youth programs to support the health and well-being of the community. Classes include boot camp, yoga, weightlifting, boxing, tai chi, and more. Find classes at ymca360.org. No membership is needed to access these classes at ymca360.org.
Sunday nights from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's K-Fox Night Beat with DJ Nastiness.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music. Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
It's May, and we will be celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month all month long here at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Stay tuned to the special programs highlighting, celebrating, and honoring the contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Please check us out at www.rainieravenueradio.world.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at rainieravenueradio.world.
Good afternoon. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Navas. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Equity and Education Coalition. Welcome to our monthly Lunch and Learns. As you might know, Lunch and Learns happen every Wednesday of the month, where we bring in really tough topics that are coming to our communities and really dive deep into what's going on, how are we working together, and how do we create a revolution. Today's Lunch and Learn is around anti-Asian hate and how to stop the violence. As you all know, we have been dealing with a lot of anti-Asian sentiment and hatred since the beginning of COVID, and we are going to dive into what that looks like, what that sounds like, and how we can all work together to ensure that we uplift our Asian brothers and sisters and siblings, as well as ensure that all of our communities are heard, listened, embraced, and respected. With that, I'm going to toss it on over to our communications and specialist manager, Renika Massey-Jones, who will be your MC for today. All right, folks, we're having some technical difficulties over here. Just give me 2 seconds and we will start introducing our panelists. I know we have Eilleen Yoshina, on from Puget Sound ESD. Can you say a couple of words, Eileen, and introduce yourself to our folks?
Hello, everybody. I'm Eileen Yoshina. I work at Puget Sound ESD in the Equity and Education Department. I use she and her pronouns. I am half Japanese American. I'm a Yonsei. My father is a third generation Japanese American, so I'm fourth. And I identify with my Asian Japanese American roots by way of Hawaii. So the story of the Japanese Americans in Hawaii. My family's been in Hawaii for all those generations. So I'm the one who moved to the mainland to make my way here.
Thank you, Eileen. Aloha. Hope you're doing well. Karen Yokota Love, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi there, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Karen Yokota Love, and I am the senior pastor at Blaine Memorial United Methodist Church. We are located in the North Beacon Hill neighborhood of Seattle. And I identify myself as Japanese American, also a Yonsei, fourth generation. And my father was, my father's side of the family was incarcerated in Tule Lake concentration camp during World War II. And then my mother is from Hawaii.
Thank you, Pastor Yokota Love. And I believe our team member, Risa Nagel, is here. She's going to be helping out with some of the chat, some of the comments that are coming in. And I will now introduce our MC, Renika Massey-Jones.
My name is Rainier Avenue. Thank you, Sharon. I use she, her pronouns, and I work for the Equity and Education Coalition doing communications and events management. And I believe we're waiting on, Kris should be joining this feed any moment now. And I think we're waiting on, oh, perfect. Thank you, Kris. So I'm going to go ahead and allow the panelists to introduce themselves, and I will start with you, Eileen.
Actually, Pastor Yokota Love have already introduced themselves.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Then I will allow Kris to introduce himself.
Yes, thank you, Renika. My name is Christopher Larsen. I am a Vietnamese American refugee from Vietnam, 1975. I also work with equity and education, working with their technology and mental health issues. I'm also the founder of StopTheHate.community, which is a reporting tool on anti-racism biasm and also on a police accountability. That was actually started by Sumet over at EC, who got me into creating a simple little report that actually turned out to be a tool that is allowing us to see where some of these incidents here in Washington State are a little bit more closely, since a lot of it's not reported to our government officials or our law enforcement agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Kris. And we are missing one panelist, so I will just have them introduce themselves once they pop in. Oh, Leandra, you are in the meeting. Great. Can you introduce yourself? Hello.
Hi. Am I seen now? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Leandra Craft. I'm a deputy prosecutor with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also a City of Federal Way Councilmember. I identify as second generation Filipino American. I was born and raised in the Seattle area, between Seattle and the City of Federal Way. As a deputy prosecutor, I focused the past year on hate crimes work. And as you know, hate crimes has raised against the Asian American community in the Seattle area and broadly in King County. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to pause for a moment. It seems like we're having some technical difficulties getting the broadcast to appear on our Zoom where the audience is. So just one moment. All right. So, okay, I will send you that link right now. So my first question that I want to get started with is, how do anti-Asian hate and biases manifest in the educational system, in housing, food, healthcare, etc., in these different systems? And I will open it up for any of the panelists to pipe in as they would like.
I can start from my perspective as an educator. I've been an educator my whole career. I was a school teacher and I taught at community college level. I think for the majority of my experience as an educator, there's a lot of invisibility around Asian American issues. So I think there's a sense that that Asians are all lumped into one big group, and that in a lot of ways we're seen as honorary white people. So like not experiencing any challenges, not experiencing any barriers, and sometimes the subject of resentment from other folks when some Asian American groups and individuals do really well in school in particular. And I think that masks the fact that Asian American and Asian is a huge umbrella term that encompasses so many people, and really masks the huge diversity of our community, and the ways in which and the barriers that different groups of us face. So myself as a half white, a fourth generation Japanese American, I have a very different life experience than folks who are, say, from immigrant or refugee backgrounds or from South Asian backgrounds and Southeast Asian backgrounds. So that's one way for me that I see anti-Asian bias manifesting in education.
Leandra, would you like to add something to that?
So I come from a different lens as obviously a prosecutor and as a council member, but we do see everything that was said by Eileen. I definitely agree with, and we can see that these issues come up in all sorts of systems, whether or not it's just in education, but we definitely see this rooted in the criminal legal system, as we know that that's rooted in. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm not muted. I'm also looking at the chat. So I just wanted to make sure that I was.
Sorry about that, folks. Thank you everyone for joining. We are just having some serious Mercury retrograde technical issues. We will be back soon up here in probably a minute or two. Appreciate everyone's patience.
I'm sorry.
You can continue. Thank you.
No one mute anyone on Zoom. Okay, sorry, can you repeat the question at this point? I was, I'm a little bit distracted with what was happening.
Yeah, so the question is how do anti-Asian hate and bias manifest in the educational system, in housing, food, healthcare, etc., in these systems?
Yes, for sure. So like I was saying, I agree with Eileen how anti-Asian sentiment can come up in education, but it's definitely in all systems in that we all have to partake in. For example, in the criminal legal system, we know that that's rooted in white supremacy. And where we see it manifest is really how law enforcement contacts our folks, especially if we're talking specifically about the Asian American community. We need to make sure that there's enough access. The problem that we've been seeing with some of the increase in reporting for anti-Asian American sentiment is the fact that the Asian American community and the Pacific Islander community may not necessarily have the utmost trust in the police system, and rightly so. We see that there hadn't been resources necessarily for those folks that English isn't their first language. So the reporting is not going to be necessarily at the level as you would see for other communities.
Thank you, Leandra. Kris, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, this is something I definitely don't want to say is new. It's something that's been ongoing for a long time, especially if we look at the Chinese American Act in the early days, when it excluded Chinese from working or Chinese from owning any type of property when we first started this nation, along with the Japanese internment of when Japanese were stripped of everything that they owned. And then, of course, when the migration of Southeast Asians coming to the U.S. in the 80s. I know from speaking with a lot of people, there have been the animosity as to why are we basically getting in and helping these people, as they would say. And it's not that we're helping these people. It's a nation that's coming together and still building. It's a nation that has always been built on immigrants from day one. So I don't understand why it should be any different. But when we have a leader of our nation perpetuating this anti-Asian hate with a lot of the rhetoric that has been thrown around, it allowed people to come out more that maybe might have hidden this or might have not known that these are type of resentments that they own. But to be able to come out and publicize and say it's okay to do this, that's when we see this huge rise on anti-Asian hate. And it all stems from our criminal justice systems to our housing to our government funding. And I think that also that the media plays a huge portion about it, because we can definitely talk about the issue, but what are we going to do to resolve these issues?
Pastor Karen?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention that I also, my whole ancestry is out of the Japanese internment or incarceration experience. My family was there, and there's this idea also of being, even though I'm a fourth generation Japanese American, a perpetual foreigner in my own country that I identify with as an American. And I think that there's that constant struggle of just feeling like you're never, you're not equal, you're not good enough. And the feeling like you're always having to prove your Americanness, which contributes to this kind of anti-Asian hate. So that's been a struggle for my own personal life, but also just with the congregation that I serve. It's a historically Japanese American congregation, and it's multi-generational. It's also branched out to being Asian American. So we have so many different people that worship there, from Korean to Chinese, Japanese, Hawaii, people from Hawaii. We have multi-racial, multi-ethnic, and it's just, we're constantly trying to encourage people, especially during these times, to speak out. I think there's also culturally this expectation that we'll just kind of go with the flow, that we don't want to create any problems or draw any attention. And so when there are things out there that are being said that are not good, that are racially charged, I think we've always been trained to at times keep our head low and to not draw attention. And so at this time, encouragement of rising above all of this and teaching people how to behave differently is I think critical. So that's those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you. And I just wanted to open it up to the panelists if there's any more thoughts on this question before we move forward. Good. So what are some examples of policies and or policy changes that would prevent anti-Asian hate and bias that you think should be implemented? And I'll popcorn it off to Kris to start off. And feel free to just jump in as you have your thoughts.
Well, I do a lot of bill tracking and stuff, and the House is getting ready to vote on the anti-bias Asian hate bill. And I'm embarrassed. I don't know what number that is right off the top of my head. But it starts from the top. It starts from an area where people see that there is decision making being done. Because when we've tried to do it at community level, as some of you saying, we're pretty much looked past and it's swept under the rug. That's one of the conversations that I've been having with the Honorable Vilma Villarreal, is that I'm tired of seeing these issues just swept under the rug. How many times this year have we saw on the news Asian hate of incidents that are happening, and you hear about it, but the thing is you don't hear the outcome of a lot of these issues. And that's where we need to focus, is what are the outcomes and how do we change it to where our state legislators and our local officials start taking notice and start taking action, because that's where we're going to see changes, is at the policy levels when we can start doing things.
And something I just want to add here also is I completely agree with Kris. I think that this happens at a policy level where we would really need to implement more education. I think that what we all of the panelists have already shared, that everybody's story is individualized, but something I never saw in school is more history about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. In fact, I had to take electives in college to learn more about my own history as a second generation Filipina American. And the idea that we heard from the pastor that you're always a foreigner really does perpetuate anti-Asian sentiment. For example, even in my personal life as a lawyer, I have gone into a courtroom, and even though I am fully dressed in a suit and I go sit at the prosecutor's table and I may have all the files on me, there have been several times where where people have assumed that I am the interpreter. And that kind of just continues to show that these microaggressions that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have to encounter on a daily basis, because there is such a lack of exposure or education. People don't understand that there are nuances between all of the different ethnicities that are encompassed with that one term, Asian American Pacific Islander. And even now, when we talk about how is the legal profession going to respond to anti-Asian hate, there are differences in how we should respond based on generation, right? There's not one response that the whole Asian American Pacific Islander community wants. We're hearing differences in how we should respond based on opinions that come from different generations.
I'll just reiterate what I've already heard the other panelists say, but as someone in education, I'll always say education is huge. I think both Kris and Leandra both said this, but I think most Americans and even some Asian Americans don't really have a sense of our own history. That when people feel that Asians are a privileged group in America, that is true in some ways. And there's also this long history and legacy of anti-Asian hate and racism in the United States that, Karen alluded to, and that is just real. As long as there have been Asians in this country, there's been anti-Asian violence. So acknowledging that, learning those stories, learning why people immigrate here, learning about the United States, complicity in other countries, in the forces that that make it so that people immigrate here. Those are all things that people don't have a lot of awareness about. So if their only perception of Asians and Asian Americans is, say, like, you know, watching something like Crazy Rich Asians or Bling Empire, right? That's not a representation of Asian Americans, and that our stories are more complex and deeper and more nuanced than you're going to see on any of those things. I have a cousin who said, you know, we need to make a show called Mundane Everyday Asians to really show people what it's really like. It's kind of boring in some ways. It's like we go to Costco and, you know, do whatever, but just to say, like, our lives are not like that. Like, it's to say that those things are Asian American, are like, say, like Kardashians are American, right? So again, just a history education about our stories, about all of our stories, and understanding the difference among different Asian groups and identities. And I would say also disaggregating that data so that we're not treating people who are fourth generation Japanese Americans like myself the same way we're treating, you know, more recently immigrating immigrants and refugees and, you know, South Asians, Southeast Asians, etc.
And Pastor Karen, would you like to add on to that?
I'd just like to say a few things. I mean, I think everybody is basically touched on the things that I would speak on, to continue to share those stories, because we all have very unique and different stories. And I think oftentimes, yes, we are lumped together. People make assumptions. And I think, you know, in terms of policy changes, leading back to your question, I think that in at least the religious sector, some of those ways that we've been able to influence policy changes is by us getting out there and supporting, you know, the bills, or getting out there to peacefully protest. I think about our church. It was involved with Sudo for Solidarity, which is it started out as folding cranes and, you know, silently protesting. And then it just kind of grew into this kind of organic opportunity to align ourselves with people at the border, or anybody that is really marginalized, that have experienced what it's like to be excluded, to be a community of outliers. And I think that if you're a person of color, that I think all of us have experienced that in some form or another. So, and getting out there to, we're all intersectional. And I think just trying to remind people that, that we are, and that we need to work together. I think those are ways that we can help with policy changes, because it does have to come from the top, trickle down. Thank you.
Thank you. So, my next question is, why are Asian Americans told to go back where they came from, even if they were born and raised in the United States? I recently watched a short clip from Daryl Doing Sue, where he talked about somebody asked him, where are you from? And he said, oh, like, I was born in Portland, Oregon. And they're like, but where? He said, I'm from Portland. He said, well, where are you from? And repeatedly asked him. And he's like, I'm American. I was born in Portland, Oregon. And then they were like very shocked and embarrassed. And I guess we just wonder is, why are so many Asian Americans told to go back where they came from when they were born and raised here? And go ahead. Thank you.
I think this goes back to what a lot of the panelists have already said, that we're perpetually seen as foreign. And obviously, I mean, even though we may have generations here in this country, I still get asked, you know, where are you from? No, but where are you really from? And where are your parents from? That is the perpetual fact that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders get are always seen as foreigners. And this is the same question or a similar question that is asked, or when did you learn English? Or you speak English very well. I remember I used to hear that a lot. You speak English very well. I don't speak any other languages. But it is the idea that even in day-to-day life, people identify Asian Americans as just Asian. And that may just seem like a very small nuance, but the fact that we are Asian American and also being identified as just Asian continues to perpetuate the idea that we're always going to be foreign, even though we may be born here, or our parents were even born here.
Thank you, Leandra. And folks, as you know, we are on Rainier Avenue Radio right now, and we will be pausing for a 3-minute commercial break, and we'll get right back into the conversation. Thank you so much.
Here with the Rainier Avenue Radio traffic update. You can listen to us in your car 24/7 anytime by downloading the free TuneIn app. Once you do, search Rainier Avenue Radio. And remember, do not curse out your fellow drivers. This has been your Rainier Avenue Radio traffic update.
This week's Rainier Avenue Radio Metro League Baseball Student Athlete of the Week award goes to Franklin Quaker pitcher Carson Burke.
Burke winds, pitch, swing, and a miss, and that will retire Brendan for Rainier Beach. So 1, 2, 3 for Franklin pitcher Carson Burke.
Carson Burke pitched a shutout, not allowing a single run in a dominating performance against the Rainier Beach Vikings. Congratulations to Carson Burke of the Franklin Quakers, this week's Rainier Avenue Radio Metro League Baseball Student Athlete of the Week.
This is your Rainier Avenue Radio.world community update on Seattle Summer Camp. Are your kids bored in the house? Take them to summer camp. Children ages 5 to 12 can enjoy many enriching activities, from building Minecraft models with Legos, writing their own comic book stories, or staying active with sports and parkour. In-person and virtual summer camps are from June 21st through August 27th, with morning and afternoon camp times. Scholarships for summer camps are also available. To register, call 206-684-7481 or visit seattle.gov/parks. That's 206-684-7481 to register your child for summer camp today. This has been your Rainier Avenue Radio.world community update on Seattle Parks and Recreation summer camps.
Wash your hands, don't touch your face, wipe things down, clean up your space. When you cough and sneeze, do responsibly. If you feel you're getting ill, isolate at home and chill. No, you're not alone. Please pick up your phone and call 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health Community Radio Station will provide you with more information. Say Rainier Avenue Radio. Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not using my GPS to navigate the land of 1,000 dances, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
All right. Hello, folks. We are back and we are live. And I just wanted to say thank you to Leandra for your words before we left for the commercial break. And I will reiterate the question and pass it off to another panelist. So the question that I had was, why are Asian Americans told to go back where they came from, even if they were born in the United States? And I'll pass that off to Eileen.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much more to add. You know, those are some of the biggest perceptions, misperceptions, stereotypes about Asians and Asian American people, is that we're not from here and we can never be from here. My family's been in Hawaii since the late 1800s and have long roots there, and been there for generations. And when I went to college in Chicago, and one of the first things that someone said to me was, "Oh, your English is so good." And just like, I think we all have a story like that. Like, where are you from? Where are you really from? The other one I get a lot, I think, as a multi-ethnic person, is, "What are you?" So like, there's just this idea that we're out of the norm, we don't belong here. And I think I was actually very fortunate. I grew up in Hawaii, so I grew up in an Asian American community. So I had less of that until I came to college in Chicago. Oh, Renique, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much. Kris, do you have anything that you would like to add on?
Yeah, sure. Eileen, thank you for that so much, and for kind of pointing out the intricacies of Hawaii. I actually brought my wife and I went there on vacation, and she's Cambodian. She's first generation Cambodian. She loved it because of the different atmosphere when it came to the Asian community and how accepting things are on the island versus the mainland here. That is definitely something that was learned. It's funny because she's texting me right now after your speech, and she says I can relate to her conversation, so that's great. No, and it's interesting, like you're saying, that if you don't look the part, then obviously you're not from here, and you can never be from here. And I'm sure that a lot of panelists will probably agree with this experience that we probably all have had, is when people find out that we are Asians and whatnot, and we have been told to go back to our country, you'll notice that the tone of somebody speaking to us will change a lot. They'll start to basically pretend like it's harder to hear you, so they'll talk in a louder tone. For myself, me being half Asian, half white, as soon as I tell somebody that I am Vietnamese, all of a sudden it's like they've become deaf, and now they have to raise their voice so I can understand them better, and they have to speak a little bit slower. So where does that come from? I think it comes from a lot of the old culture of this nation of Asians don't fit in here. And when we don't change the narrative of that, it just keeps on perpetuating with our next generations.
And Pastor Karen?
Thank you. So I serve in the United Methodist Church, which has been around for a very long time. And we're itinerant. So we get moved, kind of like, when you're in the Army, the bishop moves you. And so your appointment time is just for 1 year. And then if they want to reappoint you to the same parish, that's what they do, or they move you. So I've been moved to many different kinds of congregations. And most of the congregations that I served before coming to Blaine Memorial were of dominant culture. And, I think in every congregation that I served in, I got the question, your English is perfect. I love that I can understand you. Do you speak Japanese? why don't you speak Japanese? And I don't speak Japanese because I'm a fourth generation Japanese American. So that means that my parents were born in this country, my grandparents were born in this country, and my great-grandparents were the ones that immigrated. And it's frustrating because I go to these different parishes and I try to share as much as I can about myself. And I remember there was one parish that I served at, and I was there for 2 years. And I remember when I was getting ready to leave to go to my next appointment, there was a couple that had asked me, so now that you are going to a new church, when are you going back to Japan? Now, I've never been to Japan, so I've still, that's one of those things that I need to do. I need to go to Japan sometime soon and, maybe, connect with some of my ancestors. But the point is that, that you need to go back to the country that you came from. That is a perpetual question that I have received. And it's just, I'm just going to tag on to the fact that it is because when people think of America, they do not think of Asian people being American. That's my experience and that's my opinion. It comes from, yes, change the narrative. We need to change the narrative. We need to start educating people. We have to start telling our stories. We have to start talking about the history, and we have to change the systemic racism that comes from, that is deeply rooted, that has made this country for what it is. So that's where I land.
Thank you. And we have a question from the chat from Devin Cabanilla who says, we need to desegregate our Asian American history as well. It remains largely Orientalist in contrast. Indian Sikh hate crime is historic. Filipino exclusion laws are historic, and Vietnamese discrimination is historic. So I guess more of a comment than a question, but I wanted to make sure that got shared.
So I think that was an important comment to make, and something that I was going to touch on, and I touched on previously, is all the nuances between even the relationships between the ethnicities, all comprised in the Asian American Pacific Islander group. Like, the grouping is how so many different ethnicities that people don't even take into consideration that there are conflicts between some of historical conflicts between some of those maybe our countries of, where we're descendants from. And the other thing that I want to point out that I feel like it would be a failure on my part if I didn't point out is the Asian American experience and Pacific Islander experience can often really differ based on somebody's complexion. For example, I am really, I have more of a darker complexion than most of the Filipinos in my family, and also comparative to Filipinos here in the King County area, and therefore oftentimes get grouped in a different way, in a negative light, and that really is all based on white supremacy, in my opinion. So that's something that is also not taken into consideration when we're all grouped into the one of Asian American Pacific Islanders. So thank you for making that comment, that we need to desegregate.
Yeah, I just wanted to appreciate that perspective as well from Devin. Hi, Devin. But I won't try to go too far down a road that I don't have a whole ton of expertise in. But Orientalism is a result of white supremacy. It's historical. It's this idea when Europeans were first making contact with the Orient, right? That these were people that were exotic and foreign and all of those things. And Asia has been seen as a place that we can exploit, that we can that we love and are fascinated with a lot of things culturally there, but we can never like really have relationships with, right? So it's that's like that unassimilable part of being Asian American. And then colonization too, right? So like the Philippines have a different experience with colonialism than Japan does, right? And in Japanese culture and Japanese history, we also need to be really accountable for the ways in which Japan has been imperialist and has perpetuated harm on our other Asian neighboring countries as well too, and that comes with us here as well. And so that's something that sometimes that I think about as somebody of Japanese descent. As Leandra pointed out, somebody who's mixed. There's a lot of us who are mixed in this day and age now as well. And thinking about all of those complexities and how they translate into many different life experiences for Asians and Asian Americans. So it's really, again, just so important for us to really think about what that umbrella term means. Asian American, it means like millions of people all over the world with very, very different histories.
Thank you, Eileen. So do you think, is racism a result of the capitalist system? And I'll pass that off for Kris to start.
Sorry about that. Absolutely. Once again, we have to refer to history and how did our nation was built. It was built off of capitalism, and it was built off of slavery, where we had the early early Africans that were brought here as slaves, and then of course as Asians working on the railroads and stuff and rebuilding these cities. There is a motivation for people to get cheap labor, and that was a way for them to do it. Hence the start of racism, because with this cheap labor, we had other individuals that were basically hating on Asians because they were willing to work for the cheap labor, because that's what they knew when they were coming into this country.
And Pastor Karen, do you have anything you'd like to add on to what Kris just said?
Oh yeah, I just feel like that the situation is continues with people in our country that do not want immigrants to come into our country, and when they do come into our country, they complain that they've taken all of these jobs. I think the parallels are very much there. I think that Kris touched on pretty much. I was like, yes, he talked about the railroads, and that was what I was going to bring up.
Thank you. And I open it up to Eileen or Leandra if you have anything you'd like to add on to this. So my next question is, especially for folks on the call who just don't know, what is xenophobia and how can we overcome it? And I'll start off with you, Eileen.
Hard question. I don't know if I have an answer to how can we overcome xenophobia. Is the fear of foreigners is xenophobia. So I guess what I'd say is the first thing is what does foreigner mean? Like when you're in a country that has been that has a history rooted in genocide and slavery, what's a foreigner to you? Like we should all be thinking about and reflecting on who's the foreigner here. So maybe going back to first thinking about what we need to do to be accountable for our relationship to Native people, Native American and Indigenous people. I think to me that's the first step, and that's all of us. We're all here for different reasons, right? I think if you're a descendant of Black and African American folks who were slaves, who were brought here as slaves, and you have a different relationship to Native people here as well. And for the rest of us who are people of color and white folks to be thinking about like what's our relationship to those groups of people. What does it mean to be a foreigner? Like we're all foreigners. None of us are indigenous to this country unless we are Native people. So I'll just offer that. I don't have a solution. I'm just saying it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take all of us reflecting on our complicity with white supremacy like we've talked about.
Thank you, Eileen. And Leandra or Kris?
Yeah, I think xenophobia, of course, the hatred against foreigners is something that is heavily prevalent. But until we start changing how we teach history, I think it's going to be something that is accepted for many, many generations. We have to know that with our dark history of racism and exploitation and stuff, that these are issues that we've had to deal with. But we also need to kind of educate people with history of showing more of what foreigners have done with this nation. What are the contributions, and how are we moving forward with that? If we look at some of these big companies, prime example is Google's one, who's a huge company, which was basically started out as an Israeli company by mathematicians in San Francisco. But the fact is that these are things that are not taught, because these are kind of things that are swept under the rug because they're foreigner. But until we start changing the way that our school systems teach history throughout K through 12, I think that we're going to consistently have xenophobia, because it's pretty much in our history books.
And Kris took the words out of my mouth. I think it really does start with education, and it's, it is really on all of us to also educate our next generation, our family members, to make sure that we, everybody likes to use the term, or a lot of my older family members likes to use the term that America is a melting pot. And I have to go back and always explain to them that one of the terms that we're using lately is we want it to be more of a mix of salad, where you can appreciate all of the different people here and all of our histories. And we shouldn't all have to assimilate in order to be considered American. I don't really have more of an idea as to combat xenophobia, except for really educating our next generation and being aware of where we invest our time and how systems interact with all people in America.
Thank you, Leandra. And Pastor Karen, did you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would just say that, especially with the last year and the pandemic, with Black Lives Matter, call out that bigotry and call out that hate speech. Education's important, yes, telling the stories, changing the narrative, but calling that stuff out when you see it, whether, it's in the grocery store or anywhere on the street, or if someone's saying a racist joke, to call that out and to say something that is counteractive to what that person has said. We keep hearing about this, but I think it's so easy to just watch, something terrible happening to somebody, but then to be able to call that out or to intervene. I would challenge more people to do that, and that can just shift the needle a little bit.
Thank you. And so I have a question from Talika in the chat, is what caste are you? But exactly what caste are you? Talika wants to know if financial disparities in caste is also a part of racism. And I will open that question up to Leandra.
Whether or not economics deal with are a part of racism? I'm just trying to clarify the question.
Yes, my question was like, I come from India, and there's a lot of disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and also there's been a rampant caste system for over the decades and centuries, and it still doesn't leave its mark even with all the education. And so I'm very confused because when I'm here in America, I know that racism is color, gender, very it's very different. But to me, I'm trying to understand, is racism also that, like, where the haves treat the have-nots badly just because they are born with less or less fortunate? And because it makes me cringe when someone asks me, even over here, my Indian friends will ask me, what caste are you? And I don't want to get into that dialogue because it doesn't really matter. So have I?
Yeah, no, thank you, Talika. Am I pronouncing your name right, Talika?
Yes, thank you for asking. Yes.
Yeah, of course. So one thing to note, sorry if you hear my daughter crying in the background. She's okay. She's with her dad, but sometimes she wants to have my attention. But that is a really good point. Does economics really, are they part of racism here in America? And I think that Kris mentioned this earlier, that America is based on a capitalist system, and where we place value on people based on how much they contribute to society, and mostly that's like how much they make, right? And the nuances of that makes it difficult is our white counterparts have been able to pass down wealth for generations, whereas people of color weren't, especially Black people, weren't able to own land, therefore weren't able to create their own wealth, therefore are not able to pass down wealth to future generations. So yes, I do think that economics play into a part of racism because we live in a capitalist society, as Kris mentioned earlier. I think that where there's a difference here is that racism still plays a role even if you're the most wealthy person of color here in America. For example, I am an attorney. I have an education up to the degree of a Juris Doctor, yet if I enter a room with a white male who's been practicing law for maybe not as many years as I have, oftentimes they will still get that white male perspective will be given more of a voice in any room that I'm in, even if I'm the expert. And that is racism. We may be making the same amount, I may be making more, but still racism will interact at that point.
Kris, would you like to add anything on to that question?
Yeah, everybody definitely hit that on the mark when we talk about economics and racism. We all know the disparity of pay scales when it comes to whether you're female, whether you're a dark complected versus a white male, and by continuing that mode, we're still going to project that racist attitude towards somebody that doesn't make as much or doesn't consider to be as qualified because of the color of their skin or the way they speak. And that's a sad reality that we live in now. But again, these are things that can be changed and has to be changed at a policy level. And this is where as individuals that are able to vote, that we need to call for these changes.
Thank you, Kris. Eileen?
Yeah, again, I just, I don't feel like an expert on this topic at all. And I would love to just be in I would love to have more of a conversation with folks who are raising the question. I'll just offer my perspective. I work for an agency whose mission is to eliminate the opportunity gap, which is a manifestation of institutionalized racism in America and white supremacy in America, right? So, and we say we're going to eliminate the opportunity gap by leading with racial equity. And then sometimes when I go and present somewhere or talk to folks, what people say is, well, it's not really about race, it's about class, it's about poverty, right? And I think the conversation that I think it's important for us to have is, how does racism create poverty? How does racism create what maybe we don't have the same caste system as in India, but how do we have our own manifestation of a caste system here that prevents people from moving into, you know, a different socioeconomic group than the one that they were born into, that prevents people from providing for their children in the same ways that white folks in America have the opportunity to do. Why do we keep perpetuating colorism, right? Like, I think all those things are manifestations of racism that contribute to a caste system in the United States. So again, I don't feel like an expert on that, and I wish I could meet all of you and we could just have this conversation in person. Maybe we will someday.
Thank you. And so I have a question from actually, we are going to be going on to another commercial break. We are on Rainier Avenue Radio, and we will see you back in 3 minutes. Thank you.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not busy tearing the roof off the suckers, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
It's May, and we will be celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month all month long here at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Stay tuned to the special programs highlighting, celebrating, and honoring the contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Please check us out at www.rainieravenueradio.world.
The City of Seattle's Democracy Voucher Program sent Seattle residents their $100 in democracy vouchers. These vouchers can be used to support participating candidates, including the mayor, 2 city council positions, and the city attorney for the 2021 election. If you did not receive a voucher or would like more information about the candidates, call 206-727-8855. Learn more by visiting seattle.gov/democracy voucher.
Lock in fresh juice with the newest hip hop and R&B.
Every Wednesday night from 9 to 11 p.m.
on Rainier Avenue Radio. You know we got the dopest artists rocking with us every single week. It's myself, D-Money.
Taylor Hart.
Bite-sized Patron, which is fresh juice every Wednesday. It's Trilltopia.
This week's Rainier Avenue Radio Major League Basketball Student Athlete of the Week award goes to O'Day Senior Jermaine Davis.
And on the other end, Jermaine Davis taking the pass over to Takeo. St. Sylvester back to Davis for the basket. And Tony, all at once, the Fighting Irish leading 52-46.
Behind Davis's 29 points, the O'Day Fighting Irish took control of their game against the Garfield Bulldogs in the third quarter and never looked back. Congratulations to O'Day Senior number 24, Jermaine Davis, this week's Rainier Avenue Radio Major League Basketball Student Athlete of the Week.
This is Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Hello, everyone. We are back. So again, my name is Renika Massey Jones. I use she, her pronouns. I work for the Equity and Education Coalition doing communications and event management. So a question that I have is from one of my coworkers, Sumit Mel. I'm going to read it and call on him to just further explain this question. So it is, are your institutions committed to implementing regulations and contracting the supply chains to keep businesses / establishments who have any affiliation / relationship with white supremacist terrorist groups so they do not get businesses if they are tied to a white supremacist group? And Sumit, would you like to speak further on that? If not, if y'all, I believe we heard some kind of like troubling stories back at the beginning of COVID of different like local businesses allowing local white supremacist groups to host meetings or just catering to them in their businesses. And I guess we're just wondering if your businesses or businesses that you work with are committed to not allowing those groups to hold space within local businesses that could potentially cause harm to community members. And I will start with Pastor Karen.
Thank you. Well, you know what? We do our best. A lot of the businesses that we work with, they're people that we want to support. A lot of them are Asian American businesses. So if we were to find out that there was a business that does support some of these groups, we would likely not do business with them. But that is hard, because if you look at the larger picture of everything, right, we're like right in the DNA of white supremacy. That's the thing. So to be able to disconnect from those groups that support a lot of the businesses that we might do business with, I would think it would take some time. But if there was something blatant out there, then we would not do business with them. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but I'm trying to get down to the fact that pretty much everything that we do is systemically rooted in unfortunately, white supremacist theology, education, action, and so that's what I was trying to get at.
Thank you so much. And Eileen or Leandra or Kris?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this before. I work at Puget Sound ESD, and we have a commitment to working on becoming an anti-racist multicultural organization. And I think that one of the things I've really learned working there is we have to say we're working on it, we're becoming, right? Because just like Karen was saying, our education system is rooted in white supremacy. Our society is rooted in white supremacy. So, I know for a fact that if someone with pretty explicit ties to white supremacist group wanted to hold a meeting at my agency, that would not happen. I feel comfortable saying that. And I feel really comfortable saying too that if we found out that one of our partners we do business with had one of those sort of like historical links, or just like Karen was explaining, like one of those less obvious links to white supremacist groups that we didn't know about, but that people brought to our attention, I feel really confident saying we would have a conversation about it and do everything we could to sever ties. So I feel comfortable about saying that we have that commitment. Just like Karen was saying, like, I don't know that we know all the time, because it's so much a part of the water we swim in every single day.
Yeah, sometimes the water is definitely murky, and we don't know that issues like this are happening within our communities until it's brought up. It's a shame that we do have funding that goes out there to these supremacist organizations, and that by allowing them to tap into the funding that's available to business and that stuff, in a sense, the government itself is perpetuating that it's okay to still come out and have these racist views, and we're still going to give you the money for the funding.
Yes, absolutely.
And sorry, I have to be off camera right now. My daughter is, I'm with my daughter, but
No worries.
I will just add, the City of Federal Way and the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is working on becoming more anti-racist. And I, like everyone else on the call, I want to express that what we can say right now is we're working on it, because the criminal legal system is based and rooted in white supremacy. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we will not support white supremacists. I can say that confidently. The King County Prosecutor's Office is actually, works on a task force, especially when we're talking about hate crimes, right? There are white supremacist groups here in Washington State, and those are like not tolerated. And, obviously, since we're a governmental organization, both the prosecutor's office and the City of Federal Way, this is something that will not be tolerated in either of the organizations.
Thank you. And I wanted to pass it over to my coworker, Sumait Mel, as he has a question for our panelists.
Thank you, Renika. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, panelists, for being on with us. I do have a question. I wonder what it takes to work with you all to institute processes and regulations to make sure that our institutions that we are actually sitting in do not support white supremacist affiliated organizations. What does that look like in contracting and procurement at the City of Federal Way? What does that look like in contracting and procurement at churches and at PSESD? Some things that we can definitely want to make sure that it is instituted, that can be modeled, so that we know that, not only are we saying we do not want an affiliation with any white terrorist group that contracts with us or does business with us, but we are instituting it into the veins of the organization. So I wanted to check in, would you be open to that, look into further work around it, or are things already in the works right now? Thank you.
Thank you, Sumait. And I will pass it off to Eileen.
I'd say we would be open to it. I'd say just reach out, and I'll see if I could figure out who would be maybe more knowledgeable than I would about, contracts and all that kind of stuff. I feel like my agency would be open, would completely support an effort like that.
And Pastor Karen?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I work for the United Methodist Church, and they've acknowledged that it's been built out of. Well, I don't want to quote them. No. Anyways, it's basically. I'm trying to get my thoughts together. They would be opposed to that. But for us, since we're a large organization, there would have to be a petition written about it, and it would have to be kind of like it's like going to a legislative session. We have this thing called annual conference, and we'd have to bring that petition there. And then we would have to have the whole entire body, which is everybody that's basically in the Pacific Northwest region, vote on this to be able to reject, white supremacist organizations that we would affiliate with. But overall, yes, the church, I mean, if I'm going to bring Jesus in, and I don't want to do that because we're in a public forum that's secular, but the question would be like, what would Jesus do? Jesus would oppose racism. Jesus would oppose white supremacy. And so we do our best to try to strive to oppose those things. Again, but I'm going to go back to the fact that, yes, we're swimming in those muddy, murky waters, and a lot of the religion, unfortunately, is based on white supremacy. Again, it's been about power. It's been about all kinds of different things. So there are ways that we can start working on this. I know that the churches have definitely made statements about this. And I think that's the beginning. They've also invited different people of color, into their spaces to preach and to talk about some of these issues. I know that in my church, we are bringing in academic professors that specialize in Asian American studies and getting those stories out. And I think that, again, we bring it back to the narrative, changing the narrative, having people be able to share their voice. And over time, I think that also educates people, and that can also change the trajectory of eliminating doing business, or having different organizations be a part of, like in this case, would be the church.
And go ahead. Thank you.
I was just going to say, my boss just texted me and said we're already working on it.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kris or Leandra? All righty. So my next question is, as we all know, Asian Americans are not the only ones who have experienced hate and bias in the society. How would you build a united front with our allies to combat this issue? As we've seen during the pandemic with BLM, and now hate and bias towards the AAPI communities, what can we do to build a united front and come together to combat these issues in a solid, united way? And I'll open this up to Kris first.
I knew you were going to do that. I just can't reiterate enough that we have to start with education. Without the educational piece, I think it's going to definitely fall on deaf ears, because in our educational society, this is taught within the schools. Because as we're teaching within our own individual cultures, we're not getting the same message across, it seems like. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, that's definitely a tough one for me. Thank you.
Leandra, would you like to add on to this?
I really second what Kris said here, that it really just comes down to education, and I don't want to just repeat what the points that were brought up earlier. Thank you.
I would love to share some thoughts about that. I have some really amazing folks I work with in both at my agency and in the community. And I'll say, first of all, like, as people of Asian descent, as Asian Americans ourselves, we need to show up for other groups, right? So we need to demonstrate our solidarity. And one of the conversations sometimes I have with other Asian folks is that that's not always culturally natural to us to be sort of loud, or to be, outspoken all the time. We're a very collective group of people. This is a big overgeneralization. Like, I encourage people not to do, but culturally, a lot of us are from collective communities where you don't, as an individual, you're less important than the community that you're in. And so to be that person that speaks up, it doesn't always come naturally for all of us. So I always like to say too, though, that we have such a legacy of resistance and such a legacy of activism in our communities. And again, with the education piece, people don't know about. So many examples of people who did take a stand. Today's Yuri Kochiyama's birthday, one of my sheroes. She was Malcolm X's friend and a Black Panther. She's one of the people that I think we could all learn more about. I think a lot of people don't know about people like Yuri Kochiyama. They also don't know about people like my aunties and Karen's relatives as well, who started the Asian American Curriculum Project. You're not going to know Susan Tanioka's name, But what she did was she started a project so that more Asian American kids would have representation of their culture in schools and districts that they learn in. And so we often just get things done, but you don't know our names. And so that's a form of Asian American activism I think people don't always know about. The other thing I want to say too, so we need to show up for other groups of people, right? And I think especially our younger generations are totally doing that. I'm so inspired by them. And I have just had so many wonderful experiences. You know, after the Atlanta shooting, it was really painful and really horrible. And yet I had these really beautiful experiences of people reaching out to me and telling me some things that they've done to really show up for Asian folks as well. So one example is I have an amazing teacher, educator at the Franklin Pierce School District who runs the BSU there, and her BSU got shirts that said "Stop Asian Hate," and the other teachers in the school showed up. When the kids came back to school on the first day, all these educators had shirts that said "Stop Asian Hate," educators of all races. And when she sends me emails, that's all in her signature line. It's like Black Lives Matter, and then it says "Stop Asian Hate." And I told her, I mean, that made me cry. And I was like, those are the things that are going to change the world. Like, those are the things when we show up for each other. So, you know, I know it's on me as an Asian American to show up for our Black community, for our Latinx community, for all of our other communities, to show our solidarity. And then to really just strengthen those relationships and say, our liberation is bound together. So what happens to one of us happens to all of us.
Thank you so much, Eileen. And so I have a question from Peter Mayer in the chat, and I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. The State Board of Education is working on building in ethnic studies into K-12 education in our state. What are ways do you suggest to do this for Asian American history and cultures, especially with the range of Asian experience and origin? And I'll pass it off to Kris, as you've talked a lot during this panel about education being the number one.
Are you asking how to create it, or what exactly are you asking on that aspect? Renika?
From an interpretation of this question, I would say maybe in ways to create it, but also what are things that are not currently being taught in our K-12 classes that should be a number one priority when the State Board of Education, other education administration systems are building ethnic studies into our programs.
Yeah, when we're talking about ethnic studies in our educational programs, I can definitely see that in the early stages of education, of creating those nuances of what the different cultures are. But later, as we're getting into junior high school and high school, is that the struggles that the API community and other communities of color have actually had to go through. This isn't just something that should last a couple weeks and it's just in a chapter of a book. This is something that is ongoing, and it's going to take a long process. Right now, there is not enough emphasis on how our history was a racist history. But we also need to kind of educate on how we can get past that. But when we're talking about the ethnic studies and that, I think we definitely need to spend more than just a chapter on the issue itself.
Thank you. And Peter, did I clarify that question correctly for you? I want to make sure I asked the question correctly.
Am I on?
Yes.
On here?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Peter Mayer. You pronounced my name right. I'm the chair of the State Board. As you all may know, the State Board is working with other organizations and trying to figure out how we can integrate, that's probably the wrong word, how we can build in ethnic studies at all levels, not as necessarily as a class or only as a course, that is, but as into all levels of study. So one thing that I ponder is Asian history and experiences, as Kris just pointed out, are important, but it's, as we've had already in this conversation, there are a number of strands depending upon the origin country and the experience in this country. So I puzzle how we can accomplish that without glossing over and just skipping. So it's just something that I wonder about. I thought maybe people would have, as well as other people's.
I think that's a really wonderful question, and I think that you have a huge task ahead of you. I personally feel that all histories should be taught on all levels. So, for example, when I was in elementary school, all through high school and even college, when we learn about America's history, we always hear, history is written by the winners. So America's history should encompass all the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like when we were expanding, when America first started, there were people that were here before the settlers, but we don't really hear so much of that history of our Native American brothers and sisters. We need to hear that. There needs to be a recognition of more than just the margin of, and then there were these people, because all of these people comprise America, and it may not be the history that we want to, it's not our proudest moment, right? But all of that needs to be told so we have a better context of what America is comprised of, because then you get to college and people are like, oh, wait, we didn't even know there was such a thing as the Asian American or the Asian Exclusionary Act, or we only heard about Chinese Americans when it came to building the railroads.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I'm in favor of ethnic studies. It's just that I want to think about it in a way that becomes truly meaningful and not 15 minutes on Filipino history and then 15 minutes on something other. And I think to be meaningful, it needs to be deeper and built into the entire curriculum.
Well, no, I'm sorry, Eileen, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there are many amazing, talented people working on this, and I would encourage you to connect with them. So there's the Washington Ethnic Studies Network, I think is the N. So WAESN, and within I happen to work with a group called the Educators of Color Leadership Community. So educators of color, to me, are really positioned brilliantly to lead this work. They teach their histories. They are community members who know how to teach their own community. So, and there are a number of them that are already working on this. So to tap into those expert educators that we have out there that are doing this work and know how to build curriculum and know how to build meaningful curriculum and are from our communities. And then the last thing I would say too is that remember that curriculum is often determined by your local school board. So get active in your community and go talk to your school board about what you want to see kids learning and how you want them to see them learning it. In collaboration with those other groups and resources that I mentioned, there's a really amazing amount of people that are doing some great work around integrating ethnic studies.
No, that's great. I just wanted to point out that our history isn't just a 15-minute segment. It's not a margin in a book. Our history is a timeline, and if you follow the timeline of racism throughout the U.S., it flows pretty much. It's not just it's part here, part here, part here, and there's dead spots. It's consistently flowing through the 1700s when people came here. And so that's what needs to be taught, is how all this is tied in together, not just the individualization of one ethnicity over the other, because that's the problem right now, is we try to marginalize everybody and keep everybody in their separate little pockets. We need to be able to have an education system that brings everybody together.
Thank you, Kris. And on that note, we are coming to the ending of our program today. I just want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking time out of your day to join us here and be able to answer all my questions. And thank you to all the people in the audience for listening and asking some very thoughtful and great questions. And I've also heard that it is Eileen's birthday. So thank you so much for being here on your birthday. We really appreciate that. And with that, thank you. This will be posted onto our YouTube channel by end of day today, if not tomorrow. And again, thank you so much, everyone. And with that, we are on Rainier Avenue Radio, and we're going to a commercial break. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in right here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio. We'd like to thank our folks at King Public Health, Seattle King County. Getting vaccinated is easier than ever. Thousands of appointments are now open, and anyone over age 16 is eligible. Vaccination is free and available regardless of insurance, citizenship, or immigration status. Here are a few ways to take your shot. 1, visit one of our high-volume vaccination sites. Locations include Kent, Auburn, Seattle, Renton, Redmond, and Shoreline. At many sites, no appointments are needed. Find out more at kingcounty.gov/vaccine, kingcounty.gov/vaccine. 2, find a vaccine by zip code at vaccinelocator.doh.wa.gov. That's vaccinelocator.doh.wa.gov. And 3, you can schedule by phone. Call the King County COVID-19 call center any day, 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. at 206-477-3977. 206-477-3977. Interpretation is available, and you can find all of this information available in 18 languages at kingcounty.gov/vaccine. kingcounty.gov/vaccine. You can take your best shot. Stay tuned right here on Rainier Avenue Radio for this brief message, and you can resume on our audio streams on RainierAvenueRadio.world or on our app, which is Rainier Avenue Radio, both Android and iPhone users. Community Spotlight will be your next program.
RainierAvenueRadio.world, celebrating 4 years of broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in the interest of South Seattle and surrounding communities. Hey, it's Tony B, and yes, I'm excited to share with you that April 1st is our birthday. This one is our 4th of amplifying the diverse voices in our communities, broadcasting community events, providing award-winning instructional classes to youth and adults, supporting our music communities in all genres and forms, hosting critical conversations, and making sure that we are who you are. 2020 provided us with the opportunities to meet the needs of our communities. Rainier Avenue Radio is proud to have provided our communities with the most comprehensive coverage of how the coronavirus did and continues to impact our communities. And so, for our birthday, on behalf of our amazing staff, volunteers, and show hosts, to all of our contributors, supporters, listeners, and viewers, thank you. Thank you for your support and patience while we were trying to figure out this internet and broadcasting media thing 4 years ago. Thank you to our youth students who took our courses in interdisciplinaries like communication, journalism, multimedia, math and coding, adult digital literacy, social media analytics, beat making, film, photography, and of course, broadcast. Thank you for staying with us even when we made mistakes. You know that when we provide opportunities for you to share your voice, thoughts, issues, concerns, and talents, then we look at that as growing together. As the African proverb says, that is how we will go far. We have grown, and you've grown with us. We have over 80 shows hosted or produced by members of our communities. And all of this during a pandemic. But that is one reason why we do exist. As a true grassroots organization that started out broadcasting out of a study room in the Columbia City Library, we formed alliances with groups like the HCAACD, worked with city government, private developers, and a variety of arts organizations to promote sustainable art space, land acquisition, and ownership for arts organizations. I'm sure many were shocked when we leased 3 properties in the heart of Columbia City, providing our community members with business opportunities for a hair salon, barbershop, recording studio, rental hall, youth concert and celebration space, artist residency, and an art gallery, among the other multiple uses. We are continuing that growth as we move towards ownership of property in the Central District and in land acquisition in South Seattle's Columbia City to preserve the historical and cultural artistic integrity of our communities and ensure that independent voices continue to be heard. So for those of you who have found out about us recently, we thank you on our birthday for allowing us to broadcast our community-created content however and wherever you listen and watch. If you'd like to make a birthday donation to Rainier Avenue Radio, it would be much appreciated. Yes, times are tough, so any amount would be greatly appreciated. You will see the results. Here's how you can donate. You can go to our website at RainierAvenueRadio.world and go to the donate page. You can Venmo at Rainier Avenue Radio. You can send a check to Rainier Avenue Radio, P.O. Box 18774, Seattle, Washington, 98118. You can donate to Shunpike, which is our fiscal agent. Just indicate that your contribution is for Rainier Avenue Radio. Shunpike is the 501c3 nonprofit agency that provides independent art groups like ours in Washington State services, resources, and opportunities. Once again, happy birthday to us at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We are your community radio station. We will continue to provide you with community-created content, broadcast live from our communities, and of course, we'll bring you high school sports like nobody else can. Join us in celebration. Rainier Avenue Radio.world.